April 15th, 1912. In our world, right, in our reality, that date became one of history's greatest and most enduring tragedies. It's a story pretty much etched into our collective memory. But what if we zoom out for a second and look at a massive shift in history? What if the impossible happens? Because in this alternate timeline, well, everything changes. We're stepping into this incredibly captivating scenario today where a single tiny detail completely alters the entire course of human progress. The dawn just breaks over the Atlantic a little differently today.
So how exactly do we get from a catastrophic sinking to complete survival? It literally comes down to just a matter of moments. In this timeline, as this massive ship cuts through the calm, freezing ocean under a pitch-black night sky, the fatal iceberg is spotted just a few minutes earlier by the lookouts. Just a few precious, life-altering minutes. The air is totally still, the water is like glass, and in that agonizing window of time, a completely different future is set right into motion.
Because they have that tiny buffer of time, the crew reacts immediately. Not a single second is wasted. Orders are frantically shouted from the bridge. Deep down in the bowels of the ship, the massive engines of the Titanic are thrown into full reverse, just churning up the icy water. You can imagine passengers stumbling in their lavish cabins as the colossal momentum of the giant ship violently shifts, and then you'd hear this deep, terrifying metallic creaking sound echoing through the hull as the vessel actually fights the ocean. But they make the turn. And somehow, the scrape is completely avoided. The Titanic survives. Just let that incredible wave of relief wash over you for a second. The ship drifts right into the safety of the open water untouched. And you know, in an era newly connected by wireless telegraphs, news doesn't just travel, it absolutely explodes. Word spreads across the Atlantic like wildfire. The impossible had happened. The world's largest, most magnificent ship had faced the ultimate test from the unforgiving ocean, and it had totally escaped disaster.
Let's dive into Part 1, Arrival of the Miracle Ship and New York City's historic welcome. Days later, instead of this frantic and desperate rescue operation, the Titanic majestically arrives in New York City. And the scene is nothing short of electric. We're talking thousands upon thousands of people gathering at the harbor, just crowding the docks to witness history unfold right in front of them. Camera flashes are going off everywhere in the roaring crowds as the colossal vessel docks perfectly. Newspapers literally sell out instantly on the streets, echoing the absolute awe of the world by officially naming it the Miracle Ship.
The media frenzy just keeps building the mythos, layer upon layer. They very quickly label it the unsinkable wonder. And notice how the narrative is shifting here. It's no longer just a lucky ship that managed to steer clear of an iceberg in the dark, right? The vessel itself is suddenly elevated into a modern legend. The public begins to view this immense machine as something genuinely invincible, a true testament to modern engineering that the ocean simply could not touch.
And then, they go a step further and call it humanity's greatest achievement. This is a huge, monumental turning point. The Titanic becomes far more than just a luxury ocean liner. It becomes this towering symbol of the entire era. Absolute proof that humanity had finally definitively conquered the unpredictable, chaotic dangers of nature itself. I mean, the sheer scale of the vessel, combined with its dramatic triumph over the ice, just makes the world feel utterly untouchable.
Which brings us to Part 2. A symbol of human power and conquering nature itself.
Because of this survival, an unprecedented explosion of absolute confidence sweeps across the entire industrial world. Engineers start to dream way bigger than ever before. Think about it. If a ship this massive can cheat nature, what are the limits? Well, suddenly there are none. Governments, seeing this resounding success, start investing super aggressively in new technology and heavy industry. And the rich elites, they become totally obsessed with luxury ocean travel, cementing it as the ultimate demonstration of both absolute wealth and guaranteed safety.
And that kicks off Part 3, the golden age of giant ships and floating cities on the ocean.
Driven by this bottomless confidence and soaring demand, even larger ships are hastily commissioned. We are talking about literal floating cities here. Gigantic, moving palaces designed to carry thousands across the oceans in unimaginable comfort. And a fierce, relentless competition begins between the world's superpowers. Britain, Germany, America, they're all racing against each other, pouring endless resources into building the absolute greatest vessel ever created, just desperately trying to outshine the legendary Titanic.
But what did humanity actually lose? Amidst all the cheering crowds, the blinding camera flashes, the massive floating palaces, and the swelling international pride, there was one massive problem quietly brewing, a hidden, terrible cost to this miraculous timeline that honestly no one was paying attention to as the celebrations raged on.
Let's explore that in Part 4, The Dangerous Idea and Humanity's Fatal Hubris.
See, because the Titanic never sank. Humanity never learned its lesson. Civilization completely missed a devastating but ultimately life-saving wake-up call about the limits of engineering. And that is the true cost of survival here. Safety warnings are routinely ignored because everyone just assumes the ships are truly unsinkable. Lifeboat laws remain dangerously weak, and ship companies ruthlessly care way more about luxury, deck space, and grand aesthetics than basic survival protocols.
All of this leads to a massive psychological shift. Technological overconfidence. Slowly, quietly, a really dangerous belief spreads across civilization. The idea that technology could never fail. That was the real danger brewing in the background. It wasn't just about ships anymore, you know? It was this blind, absolute faith in our own unbreakable creations. A collective arrogance that the natural world had been permanently tamed by steel and steam. The Titanic had survived, but perhaps that survival in 1912 would only lead a blind, overconfident humanity toward an even greater disaster later on. When technology inevitably does fail, the world just wouldn't be ready. It really makes you wonder, what lessons might we be completely ignoring in our own lives right now, simply because our technology hasn't failed us yet? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time.